This episode of Fresh and Buds is brought to you by the Ancient Ones. Who are they? We don't know. Maybe Cody Williams knows. Find out now. Fresh and Buds.
Fresh and
All right, folks. Welcome back to yet another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all of my buds. And today we are joined by a bud from, well, the Fabled Runaways team, Cody Williams, also on their podcast, which is off the presses now, really cooking. How you doing, buddy? What's going on?
Doing great. Just got back from Pro Tour, like a week ago, and kind of just not playing Fab right now. Kind of missing it. Like, it's like I get done with work and like normally I'd be grinding Fab, like a little bit during work, but then like mainly like after work. And I'm just like, what do I do with all this free time? I don't know what to do. And then I just start like, I guess I can work on a deck. And it's just like it's like I don't know what to do with myself when I don't have a cycle to work through.
Yeah, it's that weird time, but we're about to get back into it with the ProQuest season coming in. I guess 2 weeks at the time of us recording now. And did you have a good time in LA? How did the tournament go for you?
Yeah, I thought the tournament went super well for the team and for myself. I was pretty happy with it. I mean, LA was LA. I would prefer not to go back there for another major, but we were lucky enough that I had a hotel literally across the street from the venue, so I didn't have to see much of LA. I did have some good food, which was nice. And overall, I think the tournament experience was phenomenal. Like, it was one of the best well-ran tournaments I think we've ever had. It might have been the best like major event we've ever had ran. I think the coverage was amazing. Of course, Ethan absolutely killed it on the coverage. And just like I thought the judges were on point. We had, a little bit of kerfluffles at like some previous events with some judge rulings or like attentiveness or just like, but they were all on point. I heard about like almost no bad rulings the entire weekend, no like issues at all. I know they struggled a little bit being able to deck check people, but I don't think anyone's complaining about that.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I just thought the tournament was ran legitimately our best tournament.
Well, that's awesome to hear. I mean, I could say from the viewer standpoint, and we talked about this last week on the show, but it was Ethan did a great job, and the coverage was awesome. And you know what? As much as we're going to probably talk a little bit about Variance and Flesh and Blood and stuff like that, it makes for a great viewing experience. A lot of what happened is a lot of fun to watch Fab right now, which I think is a net positive for the game. And, having such a well-run event as well as, on all aspects as well as there and for the viewers was pretty awesome. Now,
dude, I can watch my game back and look at my hand. I went through my entire game. I tracked every single one of my hands, wrote all of them down. I've never been able to do that at a major event before. Like, the camera work and the quality and like the attentiveness was just literally perfect. So I went down, I wrote down every round, what my hand was, what my arsenal card was to like re-go through my match. And I was like, it is so amazing to have like this level of quality.
Well, I respect that. I can't even listen to my own voice when I edit this thing back, and I can't even imagine looking at my hands and what I did wrong. But, kudos to you, obviously, being able to do that. That's really cool. But I wanted to bring you on, Cody. We've been relatively locals. You're in the Philly area. I'm Jersey. We've seen each other at a lot of events. We've chatted, played against each other a ton of times. And I think it's about time we get you on, especially now coming off the heels of, the Fabled Runaways podcast humming over there. And, you guys are doing a great job. But before we get to any of that, let's get to know you a little bit. First, Cody Williams, when did your TCG journey begin?
Well, I want to say thanks for having me on. It's been a long time coming, especially because we go to a bunch of the same events, every year. But so I appreciate you having me on. But mine started in two distinct spots. There's two moments that probably ruined my life because now I'm just like addicted to card games. One of them was in third grade when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I remember moving to a new school. Pokemon was super big at that point in time. I remember going on the playground and someone had a binder of Pokemon cards. And I remember it was the first time I'd ever seen like cards in my life. Like, it was like the first time I ever saw trading cards, and they were like in a binder, and there was like a bunch of like Rhydons in a row, in the binder, and there's just like a moment of like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this feeling is, but I want all of this in my life. Like it was just like it's like a distinct moment that I just remember looking at this page of Pokemon cards going, I want this and I need this. And so that was like moment one that just got me into cards, right? And then I've told the other story before, but like the other one was when I was 10. I was playing Pokemon for like 2 years at this point. Like me and my best friend at the time looked up like a local tournament, and in our city there happened to be a store called On Cue, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was like a DVD like electronics type store, and they hosted like a weekly Pokemon tournament, right? And so we're going to our first locals, and I took my psychic deck with my, bullshit cards in it that, because I was a degenerate even back then. And then I like brought it in there, and the first week we show up, they announce that they're having like a gym leader tournament, which means whoever wins this event is the gym leader of the store.
Oh.
Gym leader of the store doesn't really do anything, but like you just get the title of gym leader for the store. And so that was my first time. I sat down and I won the tournament. There was like obviously not like a ton of people. I think there was like 10 people or something there, right? But I was like a 10-year-old kid. I won the tournament and they just made me gym leader, and that was it. I was competing in card games for the rest of my life because of that moment. I think if I don't win that tournament, maybe my competition level is different. But it leaves such a big imprint, and I was forever the gym leader. They never held another tournament for like the year that we went there. So I was just a permanent gym leader of the store.
I mean, that's so cool. I mean, it almost kind of shows like what it is to kind of win and like have titles and stuff like that. Like that is pretty cool, even at like such a young age. And you say, yeah, sure, there might have only been 10 people, but at that age, it might as well have been 100 people. It doesn't, to you, you're just like, I am competing in something, and you won. And that's pretty awesome. Now, did you continue to play Pokemon after that, or did you start to get into other games?
Well, it went Pokemon, and then like that went away, and then I got older and I played Yu-Gi-Oh. I played a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh for a lot of my life. Like I competed at nationals, and I won, I like won regional tournaments and stuff like that. For that, and then I played my favorite game of all time, which is Marvel Verse System. And I won. I was young at the time, but I traveled to like big events with friends that were older. And I remember going to my first like 10K, which is like a calling level event. And I like scrub out of the calling because the 10K because I'm a kid and I'm playing against adults. I still beat some adults, which was like my favorite thing. But then they had scholarship tournaments afterwards on the second day, and they were bracketed by age. And so I entered in that, and there was like not very many kids there, and I just won $1,000 scholarship. And I remember telling my grandparents, "Hey, I won $1,000 scholarship from Upper Deck at this tournament." And they're like, "You can go to every tournament you want from now on." And like, so that's what I would do. I just like traveled with the boys, won $1,000 scholarship, and I, accumulated like $3 or $4 grand in scholarships, playing that game. And that was like one of my favorite games of all time. I mean, like, Michael Dalton, who is part of our team, was known as the GOAT of that game. Basically, he won a ton of those tournaments. And I used to, as a small kid, there was like on websites, there would be like tournament reports where they actually wrote down like what people did every round and stuff like that. And I remember being a kid, like reading through his tournament reports and like, or of like reporters, like reporting on his games. And I was just like a big Michael Dalton fan back as like a small kid. And now he's like on our team and stuff. I thought it was funny. I told him that story the first time I met him as well. But that's my favorite game of all time. I then played some Star Wars Destiny, and I did a lot of content creation for that game as well. And I was on a team for that. We had a podcast, very similar. And me and my teammate went 1-2 at nationals, which is probably like our biggest accomplishment. That's like a crazy thing to be able to go 1-2 at a major event like that. And then eventually Flesh and Blood, and then it's just been Flesh and Blood.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you bring up Michael Dalton. Obviously, I've been playing with Michael Dalton since I started playing Flesh and Blood, because he played at my locals up in Boonton when I was still living up that way. Obviously great player and surrounds himself with a lot of great players. But, it's funny to hear he was like the GOAT of a different card game. And now we're beating up on him now, right, Michael? Just kidding. Nice.
But he was very much the Hamilton of Marvel Verse System. Like there's just endless articles about how great he is, and like him winning a bunch of events and stuff like that. Like that was like his claim to fame, was that card game.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty awesome to hear. Now, you mentioned you get to Flesh and Blood, and that's why we're here, right? That's why we know each other. Flesh and Blood, how did that come into existence for you?
I had been away. Well, Destiny ended. Star Wars Destiny was canceled, and I was away from card games for maybe like a year, maybe 2 years. I'm not 100% sure. But I had like heard some initial rumblings of Flesh and Blood, right? And one of my friends who I know from Star Wars Destiny is Joe Cologne, and he ran like an opposing team when we were both, but we were always friends, right? And I asked him one day, I was like, "Hey, are you playing Flesh and Blood?" He's like, I played it a little bit, but I can't find anyone to play with because I just beat them all. And that's like a thing that he's kind of known for. And I was like, sure, you want to teach me? And he's like, sure, but you can't quit if I keep beating you. And I'm like, you know how I am. I'm not gonna quit if you beat me. And like we played, and it was probably like 15 games straight of me losing. And then I played a Bravo into him, and then I won it with Bravo. And I just kept beating with Bravo. And then him and I just like formed a little partnership and gathered up players and got on Chane. I mean, we first started playing Blitz with Kano with attacks in it, like Scar for Scars and stuff like that,
wow.
and playing that at events. That was like our first real deck, and it was just like that we actually had results with. And then eventually Chane came out, and we just were the Chane group for all of time.
You certainly were, and I got a question. Were you playing Wounded Bull in that Kano as well?
No, it was like all the Scars and Life for Lives, and then it had the the I can't think of the name. Contraband. So if it hit, then you could like play it. And then the other 2 for 6, and if it hits, you can play one as an instant. So like you play the 2 for 6. If they don't, rifting. If they don't block it out, then you can also like shoot them with a spell afterwards.
Anytime I hear about rifting played in a deck, I just kind of lose my mind. I want that card to be like so good. I was like, I want to throw it in KO just so I can do Cast Bones at instant speed. But listen, folks, I'm a dreamer. But that's awesome. Now, like, what about Chane? Like I remember talking to you when Chane LL'd, and I guess it was when Dust Till Dawn was coming out. We saw each other, I think at like Greg's Games or something like that in Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
And you had mentioned is like I don't like Chane's gone. I miss Chane. All these different things. I'm like, well, what about this new Shadow Runeblade Vincent? Like, and you had mentioned it's like, well, it just doesn't feel like Chane, right? So I wanted to know. Here we are in the year 2024. Vince has been out for like almost a year now. Is there any chance that Cody Williams is going to fly the Shadow Runeblade flag again? Or is it just too different from Chane for you to even consider?
So I play Vincent at locals quite often. It's like a deck once in a while. I'm like, I want to play something fun. I'll bring Vincent back out. Like I enjoy playing Vincent. I think the deck is fun to play. It is not Chane. Mm-hmm. It feels more like Viz 2.0 than it does Chane. To be honest, like it's like it feels like a Viscerai replacement almost in like the way that it operates. But it's just like it's a completely different deck. It might say Shadow on it, but it's not playing in the same mannerism. Like Chane was so fun because it felt like every time I sat down at a game, like I had the ability to win, but I had to figure it out. Like if I sat down to play, I could win every match I played against, but I had to figure it out. And sometimes those were esoteric lines that you could never actually figure out. You had to like hold this card and like you had to only shackle to 2 on this one and not shackle to the 3rd to, stuff that you could never actually figure out. But like that existed. That was a possibility. Right. And Vincent's just not like that. Like it has Runeblade hands. It's not as good. To be fair, the deck is better than people think it is. And Yuanji almost brought it to Pro Tour LA so I'm going to throw that out there. That is, I played a lot of it. It's just not consistent enough. A couple more cards, and then maybe we have like a real deck there. But as long as as long as Guardian players can just be like, I give you blues and you do nothing, the deck's just not going to be good enough.
Yeah, it's in a weird spot right now. I mean, it's going to probably be sneaky. Like, there's a lot of heroes like that, I think, in the meta. We were talking about Riptide before, we even started recording. I think Riptide's one of those heroes that could sneak out wins because of its card pool, but it's not quite, the star of the show as I would hope anyway. But
its KO match is actually pretty good. Yeah. So Vincent's KO match is actually like good enough that you'd be like, maybe I bring this to a tournament.
Yeah. I mean, and we saw, I didn't even have it in the show notes. I totally forgot this, but like we saw like the KO precon, Like we're getting some new cards in that. Obviously, KO is going to get more buffs. It seems like, so it could be just a big old brute meta, coming up. We don't know. We don't know. We'll see. That comes out in May, so everything changes when Part the Misfail comes out. But maybe Vincent just like all of a sudden it's like this is the counterplay to the meta. So it'll be interesting. Now, in terms of your goals for the game, you're very involved in the competitive sphere. You have the Fabled Runaways. Now you're doing content creation for the game as well. What are your goals for playing the game and also like the podcast and the content creation side?
Yeah, so playing the game is I want to win an event. Like that is the goal, right? I have topped event. I have cashed at every single tier 4 event except for First Worlds. It's the only time I've never cashed. Like I've been close. I need to find 5%. I sat down the other day. I looked through all my matches because there was like a post on Twitter talking about limited, and I was just like, well, let's go see what my limited like stats look like realistically. And I was like, I'm like not counting callings, only nationals and pro tours and worlds, right? I'm 33-11, and so I have a 75% win rate. I'm like, if I could find 5 more %, I'm topping like half those events, right?
Yeah.
Like so. It's like I sat down and I looked through a lot of my stuff, and it's like I feel like I'm 5% away from being able to top, some majors. I've been close. I've been 9th at Lille. I've top 8'd and then not won. It's like a very common thing that happens. That's like if you see me in top 8, like you should be super happy because you're like, this guy doesn't win events, especially if it's me in the finals. Like you should be like, I got this locked up already because it's just like that doesn't happen. But that's what I want to do. I want to take down, a major event.
And I think you will. I mean, you're certainly like, obviously you mentioned you have all these great finishes. And it's like, when I had Nathan Crawford on a couple weeks ago, he mentioned, we had talked about his Twitter post. It's like, man, I keep getting into this, like this rhythm of like getting close and not getting there. And it's just like, it's tough because there's variance in games. Like you can get matched into something that just doesn't make sense at the wrong time. But obviously you're right there. And also, just a note, the Pro Tour Lille 9th place. I did have you in my my fantasy pool for the Pro Tour Lille. So thank you for that. I didn't win, but you were I think my top performer. But now the podcast and content creation.
Yeah. So with the podcast, it's just something that I enjoy doing. We at the time that we started it, to be fair, everyone had stopped their podcast. Like M&R was done. Arsenal Pass was like at every 2 weeks or something like that at the time. And there was like this big lull where a bunch of things were like, hey, this is like the perfect time. And then everyone came back. And so we're like, let's move our day. So like moved off Thursday, let's release on Wednesday. But for ultimately, it's just like, we wanted to do a podcast that had a round table of professional players that could give, the advice from a professional side. And that was like something that felt like we didn't really have in the scene. We have good players, we have people who used to be pro players, and then we have just like you have M&R, but M&R was gone at the time when we started, right? Mm-hmm. But that was kind of like the role that we wanted to fill. Also, we want to be entertaining and have some fun with that. But also we want to like offer up our Discord. Like the idea behind our our Discord that we started isn't just like to make money. It was like legitimately just to be like, we keep having people come to us and ask to join the team. Like every week. I unfortunately, that's like what I have to do. So people ask, and then I have to tell them we're not recruiting at the time. And so it was like, we have all of these people who want to be on the team, but they don't have anyone like local to like start a team with, right? So what if we just create an area, which is the Discord, for these type of players can join. They put a little skin in the game, which is like $5 a month. It's not really anything. We will offer a bunch of benefits from our team to help them out, but then they have all these other people in the Discord who are at the same serious level that they are at, that they can then network with and partner up with, anywhere and get games and practice and maybe form their own little groups with. And we try and like facilitate, that ability for other people to be able to start their groups while still giving access to the team, because we just can't have everybody, right? Yeah. We can't have 30 members. So that's like the ultimate, goal. And then we see that in a lot of our content. Like we just released something I'm super proud of. We like released the deck tech for the hatchet list. And then like in the Discord, we released the hatchet list with full sideboards, like all the buttons for every single hero in the game. Some have 2 buttons because it's different if you go first or second on what you sideboard in. And then on top of that, there's a whole it's like 3-page paper that goes with it. That's all of the game plans into every single matchup in the game. This is what you're trying to do in the matchup. This is what you're looking for. This is this is what you have to play around, or you're trying to do. And we like released all of that, just the other day. And I think, it's also like trying to be as transparent as like a professional team can be without completely killing our ability to win tournaments, right?
Yeah.
We're not doing psyoping, but we're like trying to help people get better, right?
For sure. I mean, and it's like net good for the game. And if you have a lot of people playing the game and getting better at the game, all of a sudden, the tournaments keep coming, right? And there's more opportunities for you to, kind of do really well. Now, you mentioned these people that kind of come to your Discord, and they all kind of have a similar purpose and a similar like want out of it. That they could, start their own little groups out of it. Have you seen any of that yet? Because I'm starting to like it's to me, and I'm a big football fan. I always think about Kyle Shanahan and his coaching tree. They always talk about that in the NFL. Like Kyle Shanahan, like all these different coaches came from his coaching tree, and now they're coaching their own teams. Are you seeing any of that?
Yeah, I definitely see in the Discord people asking to get games with other people who are in like the premium Discord level. Like, hey, I'm trying to practice this matchup. Hey, you want to set a time together? We saw this going into RTN season. Hey, anyone want to set up a time that we can meet and play games? And then you'll see a bunch of people. Yeah, I can play games at this part and this part and this part. And it's like gets you better quality from people who are also trying to take the game at a little bit more of a serious level, right?
Yeah, it'd be kind of funny. I mean, I know you guys started as the Runaways and then became the Fabled Runaways. Well, now what if we get all different kinds of Runaways, right?
Yeah.
That would be kind of interesting. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a work. It's still a work in progress. Like it's like it's the ultimate vision. And then on top of that, we release, like videos and a bunch of other stuff to, help make it worth, the buy-in. Right. But that was kind of just the need that we saw, because it was like, hey, if everyone's asking us to join, we can't support this many people. Let's see if we can find a way to make it so like people can support each other.
Yeah, and that's awesome to hear, because there are, I mean, I can even speak for myself, my schedule's weird. Like I just, it's hard to like sometimes get games with people and practice and stuff like that. Like I feel like I'm just like randomly dead, 5:30 in the morning, I need to hop on or something like that. So like there's a lot of people like that, and that's really cool to hear, and I'm sure it's pretty global as well now. That's all pretty cool, but let's talk about some of your favorite cards in the game, Cody. I think I know the answer to the first one. We already kind of talked about it, but this is the fresh faves. I'm going to ask you a couple of your favorites. We're going to start with who's your favorite hero.
My favorite hero is Chine. I mean, that's obvious, right? And I talked about why, but I will say this: there is a hero currently in the game that feels very similar to Chine, and that is New Prism. New Prism feels like when it has the same thing where I sit down, there's some weird combination of things I can do in this game to win every game. Unfortunately, Scab Skins exist, so it says no. That's not how that works. But it feels very close, and so Prism was on my short list of something to bring to Pro Tour, but all time is Chine. And then like if Scab Skins didn't exist, then I might be a Prism gamer just like the whole time, because it feels very similar to playing Chine.
Yeah, the new Prism list is starting to really come together. It was touch and go there before this new weapon came out, but the new weapon really pushed it to that point. And it makes me wonder sometimes, like, what did they see before they printed that new weapon, the new Numenaris, which is the third one. But it's definitely a hero that I have played against, and sometimes I like playing against it, and sometimes I hate it. And that's all I need to say. What's your favorite weapon?
Decimator Great Axe is my favorite weapon in the game.
Oh yeah, why's that?
Because it's the best weapon ever printed. I think it's a monster, man. Like I love nothing more than just every round pitch a blue weapon, and then the look on my opponent's face, I can't block with 2 cards. I can't keep taking 1. It's just 4. Maybe I'll just take 4 every round. You can't take 4 every round. And it's just like this encroaching doom of every single round. The axe just advances 1. It's just there. It's just this constant reminder of that you have a limited amount of time left in this game. And it's just every round. And I just love that feeling.
It's insane. It's an insane weapon. And almost like,
yes.
I mean, we're seeing the I guess the boom of the hatchets right now. And, but we got to think about back when Decimator Dory and Decimator Bolton were kind of hanging around. It's still a really good card and good deck. What's your favorite equipment?
So this one's a little tough. I would say normally my answer to this is Spellbound Creepers, because I think what that allowed you to do in the games that you played and the amount of creativity that it gave you and skill expression was really, really high and fun. I've been a little removed from it because we haven't had a reason to play it for a while. So that would be like my old school, like my favorite. I just think every single turn you have to sit there and be like, can I do this? I would say like Prism Helmet feels very similar to that currently. But coming just off of Pro Tour, I have to say it's just the bolters. It's the boots, like the
Refractor?
Dory boots. Yeah, refractor.
Yeah. I mean, they're good. I mean, they're classic and it's a common, right? So it's like, gotta love that. What is your favorite run of the mill card you put in your deck? Your attack actions, your non-attack action, blocks, reactions, yada yada yada.
I'll tell you what it's not. It's not like an E-Strike. I hate E-Strike.
Oh no.
I hate E-Strike. I will always try and never put that in my deck. I have this argument with everyone. I think that card is underwhelming. I hate playing E-Strike.
Blocks 3.
But yeah, I would say it's probably like Sigil.
Sigil.
I think Sigil is like really underrated in the current, like in the game overall. I think having a card that so at worst it blocks 3, at best it blocks several attacks that came through. So like if you think of it more of like, I blocked for 3 on this turn, I took 1, I blocked for 3 at this turn and took 1, I blocked for 3 on this turn and took 1. Well, you actually blocked all of those attacks with Sigil. I think that Sigil is kind of unexplored. I
mean, we saw the full potential of winning the Pro Tour with it.
I mean, it's a good timing for that. This was still going to be my answer. I ran 2 in my list for Pro Tour in Dory, and that's not a thing that everyone on the team did. It was like Dan and myself. I think we're the only people who ran 2 of them. James might have as well. But it was just like one of those things where every time you play it, it just like, it feels so good. Like it just does everything that you want it to do. It can even bait cards because of the way the deck functions. But I think a lot of decks that could get value out of Sigil just haven't come around to it, or I haven't thought about putting in their deck. I saw some Victor lists with Sigil that was like beating up the mirror, and I thought that was pretty novel as well.
I mean, it's something that I personally always have in the maybe slots of my Riptide list, right? You know, because it's just like, that's like it loads. It's got reload on it in Riptide. I mean, that's pretty sweet. I mean, same with Oasis, anything like that. But you know, Sigil and gaining life is good. Life is a resource, and more of it is good. Now, you actually mentioned 2 of the controversies that we have it just kind of blew up on Twitter. I don't know. This is just how Twitter is. This is how like card games are. This is how people are. I don't take it too seriously, but you know, I think it's worth talking about. And I didn't post a tweet because I was waiting for the podcast. Exclusive content for all the listeners. But Limited. Let's talk about Limited. You said, you know, you have a 75% win rate in all your big Limited games. Now, there is a lot of controversy on Twitter about, wow, if Limited was out of the Pro Tour, it would feel so much better. People are saying that. People are arguing the other side of it. They're saying there's too much variance in Limited. You know, some people are saying, well, hey, Heavy Hitters is arguably one of the best Limited sets we've gotten. No, it's not. You know, like, where do you fall on this Limited fiasco? I know you're part of a team that has a lot of different opinions, and that's the beautiful thing about a team, that you can have a diverse amount of opinions. I personally, will give my opinion after you give yours.
I think it's rather complex. Whether Limited is in a major event or not doesn't matter to me. Like they could take it out and I'd be like, okay. And they could leave it in or make it even more rounds. I'd be like, okay. Like none of that changes because I'm just going to play the tournament either way. And whatever they do, I'll adapt or, put a strategy around, trying to maximize that. But as far as Limited goes, it's like testing skill. I think for the most part, I think Limited has the most potential to find an edge than CC does. The edges you get in CC are pretty slim unless you just have like a breakout deck. More of what you get from CC is like surprising people with a deck or getting lucky. Because everyone's practiced CC. They practice a lot of games of CC. They probably practice into the exact deck that you're playing. So like your ability to outskill people in CC is way lower. Your ability to outskill people in draft is infinitely higher. So it should be like, so draft makes or breaks all of your major events. And there's like a good and bad to that. Like obviously, if you get like a cursed pod where people switch and like they don't know what they're doing, and then it just kind of goes off the rails, like you have to learn how to navigate that, unfortunately. And sometimes you just can't, and it just like ruins your tournament, and that's like unfortunate. I wish that didn't happen. Um, Draft in Fab for the most part isn't as engaging as other draft formats are, due to the fact that our pack size is too limited, and we need all of our cards that like for the most part to go in our decks. So most of the time I've already picked what hero you're going to be by pick 3 to 5. And then the rest of the packs like just don't matter. Like you're not even making like fun or interesting choices. You're just like, what's best card for me? Oh, I take this one. And then you're like, what's best? You're just looking for your cards for the rest of like 2 packs. Like you're not doing anything. Like all you're doing is like keeping track of the ratios of what you need in your deck in your head. And sometimes you're like, oh, I would really like this red card, but I need another blue card. And then you put that down. That's like that's most of the decisions you make after like the first 5 picks, right? So I think that's pretty not great. That's why I loved drafting Bright Lights. Personally, I thought the games were like the games were pretty variance based. Like if you're the Dash IO and you get the whole like all item hand and then you just get crushed, you're like sad. But also if you're the flip side, you're playing against Dash IO and they just hit their boom grenades off the top on you and you're just like, no, like, so the games were kind of meh, but the draft I thought was great because you could be open for so long. There's so many different draft strategies you could do. Like you could take these, because 2 cost attacks were like really good in Teklo, but they were also like really good at Max. You could float between the 2 decks for a while. You could also be like, oh, I want 2 cost attacks in my red ones in my Dash IO deck, for instance. So I'm going to take these early, and it leaves me open to the other 2 picks as well. And then I have my 2 already for my Dash IO deck, right? So there's like all these different strategies you could do because you could use any of the cards in the set. And I thought that draft was like phenomenal. I might be saying that because I 6-0'd Worlds in that draft. And so like that might be like a little bias on my side, but like I felt like that the whole Bright Lights season. I loved drafting the decks. I didn't like playing the decks as much, right? And
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and Heavy Hitters feels like kind of the opposite in a way. I mean, yeah. I don't know if that's where you're going.
Yeah, that was you got right there. It's perfect. It feels like the opposite. Drafting this set isn't super interesting. To be fair, we've had sets that feel like this. This is just like more of the same. And then playing the games though is rather interesting most of the time. You actually have some like real decisions to make. And a lot of it is like, for the most part, the people who are really good at draft only like 2 heroes out of the set, and then like they just never draft one of the other heroes. And it just has to be like, draft is hard because you have to personally have a personal style of draft. No one can draft for you. Almost no one can coach you on how to draft because they're not going to be in every single one of your like draft matches and when you're drafting. It's like a very personal thing. You're sitting at the table alone and drafting. And so like I've always found that even if you don't have the best strategy, you need to have a strategy that you fully feel confident and understand and feel good in, and something that you can replicate on your own. You can get better and you can ask for tips and then you can learn new things to do. But like if you don't have an inherent draft strategy that you own, that you believe in, that like you know what to do no matter what happens, then I don't think you're going to have very good success in Limited.
Yeah, it's very tough. And you also bring up the amount of cards that we have in the packs here in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
Do you think that a larger pack size could end up being not a total fix, but help
it would be
Flesh
amazing.
and Blood? Yeah.
Yeah. Just give us another pack or something. I don't even care. Give us like a half a pack. Give us like, remember that one set where you just got some equipment? Like they just gave you some equipment pieces.
Yeah.
And it's like, just do more of that. Just give us like a pack of things that we get to start with. Just something to alleviate the need to draft 35 playable cards. And if you miss, you're just at a huge disadvantage. Like just give us something to like alleviate that pain.
Yeah. I mean, that would be nice to see. And we don't really know what's going to happen with Part the Misfail. I mean, I saw that the sealed formats like 8-pack or what was it, 8 packs, right? Something like it's something weird. We don't know what it is. We don't know why that is. That could be just that single event. I don't know. But it sounds like drafting is still going to be 3 packs, but it's going to be pretty interesting. Now, how do you feel about? Do you actually give a lot of credence to the people that are saying that it's too variance oriented? Like it could. Like, I know you mentioned that, like, yeah, you can be in a bad pod where things just go bad and you have to navigate that and it can ruin your tournament. Do you feel that, that aside, it is still a totally fine, it's not too high variance. Like, if you are skilled, you can use limited to your advantage. Like you said, you can really gain an edge.
I will say that it is the entire tournament. So like the CC rounds really don't matter. Like for the most part, you're going to go X2 in CC. You're just going to go X2. Like there's not enough edges. Now, caveat that most of us are not good at the game yet, and there's like things that we could always do to improve. But the current level of the game among like top players and medium players, it's to the point of where you're not going to get enough edges unless you have like a breakout deck in CC. You're just going to lose 2 games. That's what you can expect to do. That means the entire tournament revolves around limited and going 6-0 or 5-1. If you don't do those things, you just are automatically can't top 8. So the entire tournament is 6 rounds and they're called draft. And that is the whole tournament. That's how they're currently weighed. I did like some of the ideas of like, maybe we weight these games a little less than like the CC games. And that would be like, feel a little better. Cause like you can't really X2 draft. If you go 2-1 and 2-1, you're probably not topping. Like 99% of the time, you're never going to top that event.
Yeah.
And like that feels bad. That's tough, right? So, and there's a lot of variance in these in the games, in the draft, and I understand that. You could put yourself in the best position that you can do, but for the most part, like it feels a little too high variance, but at the same time, I've had pretty good success with it. Like if I get another extra 5%, but I don't know how much of this is bias, how much of this is small sample size, how much of this is like, I'm not there when other people are drafting. I'm only there when I'm drafting.
Yeah.
So all I can say is that like when I've played, most of the time that I've had issues in draft are my own fault. Some games just are bad. Like,
yeah.
like the game that I lost that like knocked me out of contention for top 8 at LA, he just pack hunted into pack hunt. And I died at exacts. My opponent's at 1. I have a 1-for-3 reaction set. I give him 3 cards for the rest of the game. And he goes, pack hunt, kill you at 6. And I was like, okay, like, yeah, what do, right?
Yeah.
So I think the games feel way too heavily weighted for the level of the event, because essentially they are the entire event.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I completely understand that. Now, what should they do about this? I have no idea. That's just like, that's not me. I will adjust to whatever they try and do, and I will try and take advantage of whatever they try and do. But I do understand that plight of, man, this feels like the whole tournament is 6 rounds and it's just draft.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I've seen a lot of people. You mentioned like how do we weight it if we weight it differently, and I'm very pro limited. I love limited. It's just one of my favorite ways to play any card game. So it's like I'm coming in from a very biased standpoint here, and like if my whole tournament is 6 rounds, I mean that's awesome of draft. That's awesome. Now I will say the one thing that I saw, I forget who said it, and I think probably a lot of people echoed this kind of idea, was that just do a draft on day 1, right? The 3 rounds of draft, four rounds of CC, and then day 2 is all CC. I like that a lot. Kind of like, hey, if you want to make day 2, you got to be good at both, right? There you go. Now you've proven that. Now it's all CC, and you got to get those little edges like you mentioned. But I think that would be pretty neat. But I guess it doesn't matter if you're playing Prism, because you're going to run into Scab Skin leathers, and I'm really good at segues, Cody Williams. Scab Skin leathers, people are...
Whoa, wait. You never give me your full opinion. You said you're going to go after me. I want to know, like, do you think they should keep it? Do you think they should change it? What do you think they should do?
I think it's totally fine. Now, I would be open to a little bit less in day 2, like I said, but
okay.
I don't think it is as high variance as people make it out to be. I think it is a true skill. Like when I'm losing in a draft, I realize like I didn't study this. I didn't draft enough. I don't know what's going on. I didn't read that signal correctly. I picked this card because I was like, yeah, this makes sense. And then I'm looking at my pool and I'm like, that didn't make sense at all, right? Like I truly believe that is a totally skill-based like talent that you got to have. Limited, I mean, draft mostly. It's sealed, whatever. You can be like that person at the Calling Hartford who is able to run 2 cast bones and a bunch of 6s. But with draft it's a little bit different. And there's a lot I would like to see changed. I think more cards in the packs would be really cool. Also, some more niche interactions or niche cards that could lead us into different archetypes in draft. Like that's one of my favorite things from Magic draft when I used to play Magic, was like there were a bunch of different archetypes. And Flesh and Blood is not really that, right? It's like your heroes, right? And that's fine. That's what the game is. But I think there's more room for that. I had always thought when, I guess, right before Outsiders, they said we're gonna change up how it's going, like beyond the hybrid thing. We didn't know that there was going to be 2 of each class, and I thought we were going to get 2 of each token weapon, because my theory is, like, you look at CC, your deck, your hero, the kind of deck it is usually based on what weapon you're playing, among some other factors. But in limited, it'd be kind of cool. It's like, all right, well, I drafted Rhinar. Did I draft the Romping Club version, or did I draft the Mandible Claws version, right? Like, I think that would be kind of a neat thing to explore. I understand that we're kind of getting that with multiple heroes, but I think you could do that. Multiple heroes, multiple weapons. Then you get like a whole bunch of really cool stuff going on. That being said, it might not be, that's maybe more variance for the competitive mindset than they wanted, but I'm happy with draft. I like where they're going. I think every set they've like done something new. It doesn't feel like super stale. I think the hybrid thing is actually pretty cool. I like where we're going with that. Allows you to stay a little bit more open for a little bit longer than in previous sets. Bright Lights was a cool drafting experience. The gameplay was not that great, but yeah, that's my opinion. I think that I don't want to be a full Brian Gottlieb, but get good, folks, and come back to Twitter, Brian. We miss you.
Yeah. I mean, I think legitimately that like keeping limited the way it is gives me a competitive advantage. It's like how I personally feel, but like I would like to not have to just clench my butt cheeks the whole day once we get to limited and just be like, this is the whole tournament. It's like, this really matters. Like, you know, it would be a little bit nice to be like, can we get a couple extra cards in pack? Can we get, you know, can we develop this out? So I'm just not like, every time I pick up the first pack, I'm just like, okay. And I get past the pack. I was like, we have a chance. Like, you know, I'm just like panicking in the first like 4-5 picks. Like, oh, okay. My opponents are passing me stuff that actually matter. Okay. We can play the game. We're in this. Like, you know, my tournament's not over yet. Like that kind of doesn't feel great. Right.
Yeah. And I totally understand that. And, you know, I've only, I mean, personally, I'm someone who's only played in nationals. I haven't played a pro tour yet, and I'll be playing in nationals in Minnesota. So I'll have to like experience this again. But like, I think that I like where it's at. Obviously there's always improvements, and I think they are trying to improve limited every single time. So I don't think it's really worth, it's always worth the bandwidth to kind of talk about these things, but like, let's see it play out. They haven't really disappointed, in my opinion, in terms of like the way they've grown limited, right? And it'd be cool to see. But I do want to talk about Scab Skins. Are you a Scab Skins hater, Cody Williams?
I think we started the Scab Skin hate. Like legitimately, like a podcast like a month and a half ago, Dan and I were like, they should ban Scab Skins. Like we both just think that card should not be in the game. And like then it's like fast forward to now, everyone's like, we should ban Scab Skins. I was like, yeah, we talked about that like a month and a half ago.
Why do you think that? I want to know.
So I'm going to preference this by saying I thought Scab Skins was busted since I started playing the game. So one of the second deck that Joe and myself worked on was a generic Rhinar Scab Skins deck. And so it took all the variants out of the game, variants from his cards being like terribly costed, where it was like, you must discard a card to play this card that's on rate. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So we just took all the good generic cards and like all of the good like one cost cards, put them in a deck, and we just rolled scabs every round. And we're like, because back in the day, like pre-Monarch, this is pre-Monarch times, you roll enough 2 action points, you're just doing better things than anyone else is doing, right? And we play Flux in here, and we play like, you know, it was everything. And that because Scabs was like ridiculous. And we came from a card game that rolled dice for everything. That's like Star Wars Destiny. And so it's like 1 out of 6 to fail, 50% to get an extra action point. I'll roll this every single time. And so like that's where my history of Scabs starts with. It's just like, this card's busted. Like it just does a thing that you every single round you shouldn't be allowed to do. And then for the longest time though, Rhinar sucked. So it like didn't matter. He needed the help, right? And then we had Levia. And like Levia, if she rolled a 1, was just threatening to immediately lose the game on the spot. So there was like a really big risk there. It didn't feel good when they kept rolling, well, but at the same time, the missing was just like terrible. And then holding a hand, hoping to Scabs hit was just like not a thing you could really do in that deck. Right. So like it never showed its true power, is what I was saying. Now, when we have KO, where they have outs and they're just using it to like get additional value or push over top of game plans, or hey, I'm like out of this game. Let's see if I'm gonna win or not. Like, let's see if I can come back, and they just like go for it, right? All of these things don't feel good. And Scabs does something that this game shouldn't be doing. It like they said they didn't want to give easy action points again. This is pretty easy action points with like one downside, which is like you hit a 1. But if you're already losing the game, there's never a reason not to do it. That's the issue. The issue isn't always when you're ahead. It's also when you're behind. There's no reason not to roll Scabs now. Like, I'm already losing the game. Let's see if I just magically win. And then for like Prism, it just like breaks Prism. Like the whole game is just Scabs. Like they can't play the game at all. I just think that the card itself, blocks for 3, is reusable over and over and over again throughout the entire course of the game, as much or as little as you want. And it does the thing that they don't like, easy action points.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, so I'm coming.
And they don't need it. They don't need it.
Yeah,
the deck is so good, they don't need it. They have good boots. They have technically maybe better boots. It blocks for 1 and they can get a free action point anytime they want.
Yeah, yeah.
Like beaten trackers. Right?
Yeah, beaten trackers. And, I can empathize with where you're coming from, Cody. I am coming from, I'm an old Leviathan player, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember the ones. I remember the double ones. Before when we still ran Gambler's Gloves. I remember those days. I was there, Cody.
I was there, man. I was there.
I was there. I was in it. I was in the shit. But, and it does feel different with KO being a hero, and KO does answer a lot of the complaints and questions that the brute players had. Like, you're just giving us these high variance heroes. It's like it's feast or famine. It's always feast or famine. And then in a lot of ways, that's what Scab Skins is, a feast or famine. Though it's probably more feast than famine in the right deck and used correctly. It's tough though, because I forget who said it, but somebody on Twitter said, we're complaining about a legendary from Alpha, right? It's like from the first set ever. So it's like, what can we do to push that? Like, do you power creep it to the point where like no brute wants to play Scab Skins? I don't think that would be great. But banning it is so tough because it also holds a lot of value as being a legendary from the first set. We've seen some reprints here and there, but it's definitely not as high as it once was. So it's tough to say. I'm not a fan of banning it. I'm not a fan of banning it, but I understand why it can be tough, but I see people lose to it, right? And as someone who's playing against a lot of brutes now, as someone who used to play a lot of brutes, and I mean, to me, maybe it's just like I get like this PTSD. I see people rolling Scab Skins with no Gambler's Gloves. I'm like, you guys are crazy. This is like, I would have never done this. I mean, I did it after my first Gambler's Gloves broke, but those were the days. So I don't really know what the answer is. Do you have an answer outside of banning it? Do you think there's anything design wise they can do for this kind of quote unquote Scab Skins problem?
The issue is it's from Alpha.
Mm-hmm.
It's before they had a standard, and it was before 2.0, and it's before they knew how they wanted to make cards.
Mm-hmm.
So it's way pushed than any other boots in the game are. It has a reoccurring ability, which boots don't get reoccurring abilities in this game. It's not a helmet. It's not like another slot. Typically the helmet or the gloves are reoccurring abilities in this game. So you think of like Mask Momentum, or you think of like Shuko's, right? Chess pieces are always, because they're typically chess pieces are give resources type of abilities. And now they have it all mapped out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like what each piece typically does. And boots typically, well, it gives you some action points. Like that's what it's supposed to do. But boots don't typically have reoccurring value outside of maybe like illusionist.
Yeah.
And that's only reoccurring value if your opponent allows that to be reoccurring value. So the point is Alpha is one of the good arguments to get rid of it. It was made before 2.0 in a different time to do different things. The card has always been far better than how it should be. If it had one block on it, maybe it'd be a little better, but they already printed a replacement. It's called Beaten Trackers. My game on stream, against Matt Rogers, he rolled one time. That one time, he got 2 action points. And because he got 2 action points, he went 4 wide. He could have done that with beaten trackers.
Mm-hmm.
And he just would have not had 2 extra block, right?
Yeah.
Which is fair.
That's
good. It's a fair, and it's a really good card. He went 4 wide on me as KO. And like, now he got to do that and block 3 for 3 and 2 extra block. Like, it's just like, we don't need a card like this. Like, Snapdragons has been played in a million decks because it just gives you that action point, right?
Mm.
And it's like, we made the replacement for it. We don't need this old thing that we developed back before 2.0 to still be in the game, to still be causing problems.
Yeah.
It also just doesn't feel good either way. I don't like when my opponents roll a 1.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't feel like an earned win sometimes. I mean, I understand that, and it's tough to say. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in Alpha. Like, I don't know about Spring Tunic. I would like to see decks not run it anymore. It's I guess not archaic, but archaic, talking about something that was printed in 2019. But it's hard to say. Like, I don't know. Like, I saw somebody, and I want to get your opinion on this. I saw somebody talking about, well, let's see if I think it might have been Yuki had mentioned, let's see more interaction with equipment on our attacks and our cards. Is that a direction that we can push to kind of counteract these older, more pushed equipment?
I mean, ways to interact with their equipment with our attacks.
Yeah, like I think Drill Shot was the example used.
Sure. I don't know. I've also been on record saying that I think Tumultai should be banned as well, because I don't like how that impacts the game. That is a thing that I said in previous formats. It wasn't as important anymore. But there were formats where if you get Tumultai, you lose the game. If you don't get Tumultai, you probably win the game. And it was just like an oops, I win button. Yeah. But I don't need more interaction with that. I have my own equipment that should be in some equal power level competing against your equipment. And it's just like when one equipment is significantly better than other equipment, it's like a problem. And there are other equipment in the game right now that are really getting close to the same levels of being issues. Like Mask of Pouncing Links is a huge issue, right? That thing, the value out of that one card, sometimes it's like 15 points of value from that helmet. And it's like, okay, this is getting a little crazy, guys. Like, this is a little bit too much value from just like one piece of art that you put in the game. And so like, typically, like, good pieces of armor give you 5 points of value. That was like busted. Like, if you got 5 points of value out of your equipment, then that's like a busted piece of equipment. And it's like KO has like all 5 plus, value out of his equipment. And then like Mask of Pouncing League is sometimes just like 15 value, and it's just like a little much. So we have other things that are starting to become problems as well, that are from older sets primarily. But I don't understand the aversion to getting rid of equipment. Another good argument is we've had it since alpha. You've gotten enough value out of it. We don't need it in the game anymore. Like, you've had it for so long. You had the opportunity to play with it for so long. It's not like it just came out.
It's true. Now, I mean, it'd be interesting to see, they kind of came up with, I guess, a fix when they did the signature weapons, right? Like, why not just do signature equipment? I understand that might throw some wrenches in the mix because we already have some heroes LL'd, yada, yada, yada. But, and yeah, you're right. We're seeing a lot of, I mean, I'll tell you what, I'll play a game with Warrior and I get like 12 block out of my Valiant Dynamos.
Yes.
That card's
that is very,
well.
that is also an insane card. And it's fine for decks to have insane cards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we want decks to do powerful things, but we don't want the powerful thing that they're doing to invalidate games.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's what Scab Skins feels like. It feels like you play a whole game and then the whole game comes down to that Scab Skins, and it invalidates the entire game. They either rolled extra action points when they had no business like being able to win from that spot, or they needed to close out. And so the whole game, you both played the whole game, and it came down to that 1 point. It doesn't always work that way. You could probably made some different decisions, but the value you get from that 1 point is so big, you would have had to made a lot of mistakes for that not to be relevant. But it's like, when it starts getting to those points, and Pouncing Links is very similar, but it fills a niche in the role. So it's like, it's not being as spoken up as highly, but that one is, we really need to watch because it's getting crazy. But like, that's just how the games feel. It's just like, you play a whole game and then it gets down to your opponent picking up that die and you're both looking at it like, well, one of us is about to win and one of us is about to lose. It all depends on what this die does. And then they roll it, and one person's happy and one person's sad. And it's just like, it doesn't feel great. That's too much power in that one piece of equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to make a counterpoint, I think there are some gamers out there, and I might be one of them, that enjoys the rush of perhaps losing to a dice, dice roll, but
not for 50 grand.
Not for 50. Yeah, I guess not for 50 grand. Jeez.
That's the difference. I don't mind it. Like my locals, people roll scabs a million times. I don't care. I don't care at Pro Quest. I don't care at Battle Hardens. I don't even care at Callings. Okay, whatever, man. Like it's when you're sitting down and you're playing your very limited 1 Worlds a year, 2 Pro Tours a year. Like there are very few of these events, and you traveled very far and you put a lot of money in stake and you put a lot of time into it for it all to come down to 1 dice roll in that game. It's just like not a thing you can plan around for the most part of when your opponent's going to do it, what it's going to hit. You're not playing in a method to play around that. It's just a thing that's going to happen at some point in the game. It's another thing that's more evident than for Prism. Prism's whole game plan is like set up the board and then see what Scabs rolls. If Scabs rolls 2 action points, Prism loses. If Scab doesn't, then Prism probably wins. And that's the whole game. And then that is bled over into a lot of other matchups. And that's what I think people have an issue with.
Yeah, I can see that. Now, I mean, one last question on the Scab Skin fiasco before we get some listener questions. Let's say KO could very much do this relatively soon, like hits LL in a couple seasons, right? Mm-hmm. Very powerful deck. Certainly using Scab Skins to the most power we've ever seen it used, right? Mm-hmm. KO goes away, and then we're back to Old Faithfuls, Rhinar and Levia. Is Scab Skins going to still be an issue to people, or is just on the back burner until the next really powerful brute?
I mean, I don't think it'll be the zeitgeist, but I've been saying that the card is overly tuned since I started playing the game before Monarch. Mm-hmm. And we tried to build the deck to take advantage of it. The cards just weren't good enough yet, right? Cards are still a problem if they're overtuned, and the card has been overtuned since 2.0. It was slightly overtuned before Monarch because Monarch was a big power boost. So I would say it was overtuned in that aspect. Monarch, I don't think it was overtuned because Monarch was a crazy time to be alive. And then in 2.0, it was back to being overtuned again because the game completely changed and fundamentally of what power it means. Mm-hmm. And so unless we have another Monarch come out, then it'll still continue to be overtuned. People will just not be clamoring for it. But I've been talking about it since alpha. Not exactly alpha, but before Monarch.
It's on wax here, it's on wax on your podcast, and people are looking back, he was so right or he was so wrong. One of the two. We don't know.
Completely fair.
We do have some listener questions that come from the Buds Discord. Anybody can join the Buds Discord. It's in the link tree below. It's a great place to hang out. First question comes from Pat Shaw, one of my honorary co-hosts every once in a while. How many of you are there?
Me? One. There's a singular me.
I think he's talking about the Fabled Runaways.
There are 17 currently active members who are competing on the team.
Cool. Do you think that's a healthy number?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
It could be smaller. It could be probably a little bit larger. But that size is relatively good. Pretty happy with that size.
Cool.
It's going to be very helpful coming into the next set when we have 1 month to prep for nationals and we can throw 17 people at it, right? That's literally how it got this big is, I forget. I think was it Worlds? Was it maybe a set? Maybe it was one before that, but it was another one of these situations where we had 1 month till a major event. And we're just like, we can't solve it in a month. There was 9 of us at the time or 10 of us at the time. We're like, we need more people. And we just get them in here. And then we went up to 15. Okay, good.
And you're like, no, too many. No, just the right amount. Yep. All right, we figured it out. 17 it is. Capolo asks, what are your responsibilities on the team?
A lot of different things. I'm technically one of the owners of the team because there's the whole org side. There's of Runaways that's outside the team. It's kind of what facilitates everything on the team. I'm one of the owners of that. The actual Runaways. I'm also in the last cycle I've been coach for the team as well. So I ran all of our meetings and did everything that we would do as far as coach goes and set the tempo and did everything that we wanted to practice and things like that. And then I do the podcast. I'm in charge of that as well as various other pieces of media that we make. But
So
that's about it.
not a lot going on for you, it sounds like.
Not a ton. Not barely involved in the run.
Barely involved. I got a fringe member on the podcast. What am I doing? Yeah. And lastly, we got a question from Sigma, who asks, great fan here since Chain days. You've been playing a lot of Kasai, Limited, and I guess CC. What are your thoughts on KO and the other brutes? Did you test with them? Runaways have a handful of brute lovers. Are you at least comfortable with the variance of the class? Whoa, we talked a lot about variance today.
Yeah, so I played KO several times, like a lot. Obviously, we tested as a team. I mean, it's why we ended up on the deck that we ended up on. We had members. Like the best finishing member was Noah and Bagelman, and he finished with KO. So we did have people, and Yuanchi was also on KO as well. But I personally just don't like the deck. Like, it's just not how I want to play the game. It's not. I don't want to play the mirror, for instance. I don't think that's very enjoyable. A big portion of how I play games is based on how the mirror is going to feel, if it's going to be a popular deck. I also don't like its Dromai matchup. I think a good Dromai is favored into KO. And I played a lot of Dromai this season, and I beat a lot of KOs this season. And I can beat them internally. So it's just like, I don't think this is as good as people think it is. So I don't actually have an issue with KO's power level. I don't know if I ever said that. Like, I think KO's fine. Like, it's just a fine, it's a strong deck, but it's fine. Like, yeah, it has some big turns, and yeah, sometimes they do really broken stuff, but let them do broken stuff. The real issues literally come from their equipment. It's like not even the cards in the deck that are like really the issue. It's like the helmet is a big problem. That helmet is awesome. It's so good.
It's so good.
It's so good, right? Like, it makes me want to play Brute for that helmet because it's so good. And so, like, I have an entire strategy around playing with that helmet when I'm, playing the Dory deck, right? And so, like, and then it's scabs. Like, those are the two issues. I think the gloves are really, really strong, but they're like in line with what gloves do. So, like, this makes sense. But all of it together is like a lot. But you can still beat it. There are plenty of decks that beat it. I think Kasai has a favorable matchup into it. I think Kasai's matchup into KO is even easier than Hatchet Dory's matchup into KO from my experience. And I don't have I don't sit across from a KO and go, it doesn't feel like I'm playing Lexi, right? Like, it was different when you sat down across from Lexi during Lexi's heyday. You're like, oh god, another Lexi. I need to make sure I don't face enough Lexis. And I faced like 3 KOs, and I was like, okay, at Pro Tour, and it was never a feeling of like, oh no, a KO. I was like, oh, thank God, it's something I know. Like, don't be like one of the Viscerides that are floating around. I don't want to play against Visceride. Yeah. Like, like, that's like it's one of those different feelings. So no, I don't really have an issue with that. It's just like, it's not how I want to play the game.
Yeah.
It's just raw. It's just like, just beat him over the head, raw numbers with variance, which, if I'm going to play a numbers deck, I want to play as consistent of a numbers deck as I possibly can.
Which is
like Hatchet Dory. It's like
Dory.
It's just a math deck, but it's incredibly consistent.
It is an awesome deck. I'm super happy to see it kind of get that spotlight over the weekend. But thank you for answering the questions. Thank you for sending them in, Cody. Thank you for coming on the podcast, buddy. This has been a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do this again at some point. That would be
Absolutely.
a lot of fun, and I'm sure we'll see each other soon at some ProQuests in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. Can you please plug everything you'd like to plug? And yet again, thank you.
I want to say thanks for having me on. It was fun. I like just talking about stuff. I can talk. That's why I might have also started a podcast, right? I think I get comments like, Cody talks way too much in his podcast for being a host, and I was like, pseudo host, pseudo talker. But if you would like to interact with me more, we have our Fabled Runaways Discord. You can find our podcast that comes out basically every Wednesday. We have the Runaways channel, which we release all of our, actual how to get better at the game stuff. And then my Twitter X is just Fab, or it's just Manton Fab. But other than that, It's been great to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. Please check it out. Continue to find me on Twitter as well at freshbudspod. Check out the Discord. Check out YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. All that really helps. Check out the other podcast I do with my cousin, Fresh Juice, an indie game podcast. Talk about indie games. We love indie games over there. And finally, Cody, I always like to talk about food at the end of every show. You mentioned you had some good food in LA. Perhaps something that you had there you'd like to talk about.
So there's a history of every time I go to a major, there is one thing I want to eat. It's sushi. I always get sushi. I try and get all you can eat sushi because there is nothing better than finishing day one and then you're starving because day one's over. And then you go get all you can eat sushi. And then you stuff yourself on sushi. Not that expensive, like $20. Come on, let's go. And then you can hit the coma because it's all those carbs. And then you just go right to bed. Like you just lay down, you're out. You don't have to worry. You're not worrying about day two. You don't have to panic. You can't stay awake. And then you wake up, you got all that fish, good for the brain, ready to go. You're still digesting half of that food when you wake up in the morning, and you're just like small little breakfast, and then you're good for the rest of the day. I think it's perfect. Unfortunately, no all you can eat at LA, but we did have Sugarfish, which is like a very top rated sushi place in the world. And their fatty tuna there was just one of the best sushi things I've had in my entire life. It was great.
Sounds great. I love sushi. And I love whatever I think my fiance is cooking right now. I think it's tortellini soup. I'm going to be having that right after this. Thank you again, Cody. We don't have time for Charmer, of course, but we'll get to him eventually. And everybody stay fresh and have a great weekend. Bye.